Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Workplace Ninjas live Ask Us Anything event. This time from a special place. We are feeling, Jan and myself, actually the reporters, because we are situated in the PEC Zwolle Stadium.
I will show the
we are
audience.
actually on.
There we go.
This time we are on site, and we're combining this live Ask Us Anything with a security meetup, the Dutch Microsoft Security Shop, which is also taking place this afternoon. So, hello everybody and welcome to the Workplace Ninjas live Ask Us Anything once again. My name is Ronny de Jong, and I'm normally hosting this event with Frans Oudendorp. However, Frans is not able to join this episode. But no worries. We have some good speaker, good content, and almost ready to introduce our speaker for today. The live recording will be available on YouTube afterwards and on the socials, and we will briefly announce it when it's available. And if you have any questions or topics for further sessions, please feel free to drop your ideas. And let's kick it off. As mentioned, the topic for today is identity automation with Power Platform. And today we have Jan Bakker. Jan, welcome. For those who are not familiar or not knowing you, please can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. And I will mute on and off because we're standing really close to each other. So I don't want the echo coming through. So let's see how that works. My name is Jan Bakker. I'm a Microsoft MVP and MCT. I live in the Netherlands and I'm here together today with the Workplace Ninjas. Thanks for having me. And we're going to talk about how the Power Platform can help us IT people to do our jobs better and to help support our business. I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant, heavily involved with identity and access management, but lately more like a hobby, working towards the Power Platform. And I can see big value for businesses, but also for us as IT people. So today I hope to share some examples on how that works and how that looks like. So again, thanks for having me. And it's a really pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks, Jan. Thanks for your brief introduction. And yes, indeed, you talked about your passion about identity-related topics and matters. And it seems to be that you combined your passion with the great possibilities of the Microsoft Power Platform. And what Power Platform, then I'm thinking about Power BI, Power Apps. I've used Power Apps as an end user myself, and I have it on my phone. It's a native app, and I can do things like submitting my presence during the office during COVID time. But it could be also utilized for other kind of logistic processes to bootstrap it. But I believe there is much more which we can do with Power Apps. Actually, it's a kind of a toolbox which you can use building blocks and then build like crazy, I would say. Can you give us a bit more insights of what the Power Platform entails? For those which are not that familiar with the Power Platform, can you introduce us a bit briefly to Power Platform?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Well, for those who are new to the Power Platform, the Power Platform is a platform, as it's called, and you can build applications on top of that platform. And it holds, for example, Power BI, but also Power Automate, Power Apps, and they have this fourth module that is virtual agents, which is around chatbots. So you can build entire applications upon that platform. But there's a saying that within the next few years we're gonna need a lot of those applications because business depends on it. And The problem here is there are too less developers out there to build all those applications. We have a very high growth of applications and the need for applications. So that's why Microsoft came up with a low-code platform. And what does low-code mean? It means that you as an IT person or as a non-IT person, we call those citizen developers, can build applications without the knowledge on how to code. So you don't need to know scripting language like C# or .NET framework or whatsoever. So it's a really nice platform, but you can build. It's kind of like Lego, so to say. So Microsoft hands over the platform, and then they have connectors, like they call them, and those are the building blocks that you can use to build your applications. But not only Microsoft has those building blocks, the entire application vendor landscape has those building blocks and are provisioning them to the platform. So you can use them together. So with native solutions like Microsoft 365, like SharePoint and Teams and those kind of building blocks, but also third-party apps. For example, Twitter or your HR system also provides building blocks. So you can build entire processes, apps, as you will, upon that platform as a non-developer. And that's the power of the platform.
Well, that's a great insight, Jan. But you mentioned Microsoft 365 platform and building blocks. But if I recall it and remind it good, Microsoft 365 itself, and if you're looking at, for example, Azure AD, you have identity governance, and with identity and governance, you have also kind of workflows, access packages, entitlement management, but you can do and build your own processes and automate certain approval flow, for example, getting access to a security group, and behind that security group, an application can be assigned, and that's kind of often process of automating requesting applications. Does that address all your needs, or is it kind of coming with boundaries? It does provide you automation and flexibility, but to a certain extent. And why should I use Power Apps as there is already some automation within the platform itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ronny. So first of all, I love identity governance features within Microsoft. But as we all know, those features are paid features. So you need to have a P2 license in order to use it. But then again, some businesses don't want that, and they want a cheaper solution. But I'm going to be honest with you. If you have native Microsoft solutions and you are looking for a process to give role-based access, just-in-time access, then you should go with identity governance features. However, those are, in my opinion, very IT-minded. So your users need to go into portals to request access packages. Those access packages, they can extend those access packages when they're about to expire. It's not that user-friendly, so to say. So, and that is where the Power Platform comes in, where you can build a new UI entirely on that same platform. So you use identity governance, you use access packages, you use access reviews, but instead of using the native UI, which is the old ugly portal for your users, you give them a fresh UI that you can brand yourself, so to say. So you can use Power Apps, for example, as your UI, but underwater, under the hood, you're still using all the APIs that identity governance also use. So if you want to keep it simple, and if you don't have any developers in your organization, I say go with identity governance by the native tools. But if you have developers, then you could explore all the APIs that are out there, and you can build your own tools, maybe for your own needs. I wouldn't say that the identity governance platform is not flexible enough, but it might be for some organizations who have crazy requirements, for example. And in that case, then the Power Platform comes in, and you can build your own UI and your own processes and flows around that. But again, you're still using those APIs that Microsoft puts out there, as we know as the Graph API. So again, it's just about the user experience.
So actually, you're saying we can definitely still utilizing and take benefit of the platform and the backend, but by introducing the Power Apps, you're actually creating a kind of an interface, a front end, which is way more flexible, user-friendly, and easy to utilize to achieve what you want to achieve. I'm getting a bit interested how that works in practice. Perhaps also our listeners and watchers, can you show us how that looks like, Jan?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I prepared some slides, and with that slides, I will share my screen in a minute. I can show you how we as IT professionals can benefit from the Power Platform, and I have several use cases or benefits, as you might call them, and I have examples with them. So let me try to share my screen. It's a little bit unhandy here because we're face to face, and normally I got 3 large screens and a stream deck and so on. So bear with me for a second. You might see yourself here. I'm gonna minimize that. I'm gonna do it like this, if that's okay with you, or do you want me to? Well, let's see how this goes. So I'm not able to see you anymore. Hopefully you can hear me. That's great. So the question here is, how can we use the Power Platform in IT management? And I have several examples. First of all, automation. We can use it for automation. I will have a great example for that later on. I use it myself, and that's how I started in the Power Platform, because as there's a saying that a good IT person is a lazy IT person who automates everything. So if you need to do things more than once, just spend some time on automating it. And the Power Platform is perfect for that. I will show you in a minute. Also, governance. I have an example later on. For example, Teams. By default, you can request and create Teams as a user in a Microsoft 365 tenant. But if you stumbled upon a tenant that has Teams for 5 years and you scroll through that team list, you will find a bunch of teams that are no longer in use, have the craziest names. Users come up with craziest names, and so you can use the Power Platform to wrap some governance around that. For example, I will show you that in a minute. Also, self-service. I have plenty of examples for self-service. I love self-service because that takes away the burden from IT, where the business really benefits from all the features that are out there. They can request themselves and use themselves in minutes instead of hours of long processes within your IT service desk. So I also have examples for that. Delegation. Delegation is a problem because when we delegate our tasks as IT, it's most of the times it's too much that you give away, like permissions. So maybe you have a level 1 service desk that is only doing password resets, for example, and you want to give them access to, for example, other tasks, but you have to give them more permissions than they actually need, and they can break stuff. So delegation is also a great use case for the Power Platform. Then IT support, like I already mentioned. There is a lot of information in Graph API, but it is divided in tens of portals and UIs and screens and tabs. And what you can do is build an UI where all the information is in one single screen. So when someone calls up your IT support, says, hey, I have a problem, you can verify lots of things in one single second. So who are you? What groups are you part of? Who's your manager? What is your identity risk score? How many authentication methods do you have? All those sort of things, you can do that within the UI of the Power Platform. And also flexibility. Let me go ahead to the first example of automation. I work a lot with identity and access management, and I use the Power Platform for automation. So what does it look like? And in front of you, you see an example of a flow that I built and able to pre-populate the authentication methods for Azure AD. So for example, there's a new client and they're not enabled for Azure MFA. Well, you can let those users register themselves, of course. That's one scenario. But the other scenario, which is mostly asked, hey, can we grab those phone numbers, for example, and can we pre-populate them in Azure AD so that the users, when they are onboarded, so new hires, are secured by default? So they have this phone number, and then they can enroll Authenticator app, for example. So what I did is I built a SharePoint list, and it's as simple as that. I built a SharePoint list with 2 columns, one holding the user principal name, the other one is holding the phone number, and I provisioned that with the use of the HR database. Then I built a custom connector on top of the Power Automate platform that talks to Graph API and provisions all the numbers for the users into Azure Active Directory. And it took me minutes instead of hours, or the burden for your users and keep chasing them. Hey, we sent you an email. You should register for MFA. You're unsecure. You should do this. It takes a lot of time. And with this automation, you can do this in minutes. Okay, that's one example of the Power Platform that I want to show you. The other one, this is not built by me. All the credits go to Luis and Carmen, who built this awesome tool. It's also in Power Apps, but as you can see, it is integrated in Microsoft Teams. And what they did, that was the example that I just mentioned, is they fixed the problem with Teams creation. This tool is called Provision Genie. And like the subtitle says, your wish is my command. It helps your users to create teams, but also it wraps guidance around that. So it will ask you, what should the name be? And they will have a prefix and a suffix. They will check with a block list of names that you cannot use in your organization. They also will say, hey, you will create a team, but you have to point to users, to owners, who are the owners of this team before you can continue. Also, you can throw in some parameters around data leak prevention. Is this team including guests later on? Who can access this data? Are those managed devices, unmanaged devices? So a lot of questions that are not provided in the default flow for creating teams can now be done with the Power App. So lots of information. Please check it out. Provision Genie. It's totally free, and it runs on Power Apps, as you can see. So the third example is self-service. I built this tool together with Albert-Jan Schot, so also credits to him. I have an entire blog post on this where you can just import this sample from GitHub and implement it within 30 minutes, I would say, in your environment, and you can go ahead with it. What you're looking at, and I will give a demo later on in this session if there's time. You're looking at a portal where the user can do self-service. And like Ronny already said, we can do the same with an access package. We can do the same with group management, self-service management with groups. Yeah, we can do that. But those are divided in different portals. And here you can give one portal, one Canvas app, where the user can just easily go through sliders and toggles and icons, and there's context. I think to come back to the identity governance, if you request an access package, you should know by the name of that access package what it is and a small description. But if you throw in approvals, for example, then the one who is approving that request should really know what they're giving access to, and they never can see that by only the name of the access package. So that's why this is so important. You can build an UI with tons of information for the user to make it more accessible and more easy for the user. Then delegation, like I talked before.
Just one remark. These are great examples, Jan. Are you sliding through? Because I don't see chasing my the slide deck you're presenting right now. I'm not sure if everyone. Are you using multiple slides right now, or?
I'm now looking at the delegation slide, which shows temporary access manager. Come take a look. Kenneth, is it also visible on your end?
It appears also on my side, but the screen is not changing. So just want to make sure that the listeners and watchers having the right content. It remains on the same.
All good here.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's changing. Okay, go.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I believe that was Peter. So this is a great example of delegation. So temporary access pass manager is a tool that I built to delegate this feature into Service Desk level 1, for example. So this is a Power App where the Service Desk can request a temporary access pass for the users. And I also built in some nifty things like you can send this temporary access pass using a mobile phone number or an email. You can extend this to your needs. But the key thing is it's one simple application where the Service Desk people can just do one task, and only within the rollbacks access where they are able to do this. So they cannot create temporary access passes for global administrator, for example. So that's all covered because you're building on top of the compliance and security features of Microsoft 365. And you could check it out. It's a 6-part series. And I will teach you how to build this from scratch. It's a really nice user experience and learning experience. If you don't have any experience with the Power Platform or Power Apps, this is a great way to start. So I will share the slides afterwards. Of course, this is part 1, where you can build it step by step. So you're going to build the custom connector. You're going to build the UI, and you can give it different colors. You can throw up your own logo if you want. So it's a really cool experience. If you're really lazy, you can also grab it from GitHub and you can import it within minutes. But that's okay because you have to start at some point. And actually, this was only my second Power App that I ever built. So as a non-developer, everybody can do this. Believe me, everybody can do this. So that's a great example of delegation. Then around IT support. This is a tool that was never published on GitHub, but this is my very first Power App that I ever built, just to see what can I do? What can I do with UI? What can I do with tables? What can I do with toggles, with buttons, with different sliders and colors? And more important, where can I pull all this information from? Because the screen that you're looking at right now is so much information that you normally should have 10 screens for example. So you should check the overview page of a user to see what's the display name, what's the use principal name, what's his picture. I even throw in the out of office message for this person. So right under the picture, you see the out of office message, and it will also have colors around that for the availability in Teams. Then you can see all the authentication methods that the person has. So the mobile phone number, authenticate rep, all those sort of things. You can see that in the table. You can directly add, delete, or edit those numbers directly from that interface. Then you can provision the self-service password reset information, like the email address, straight from here. So you can add it if it's not there, and if it's there, you can update it. So, for example, if you need to change it, there's also identity protection integration, so you can see the user risk of this user. So no risk, all green. Higher risk, maybe yellow, and high risk, medium risk, yellow, and high risk, even red. And you can remediate that right from here. You can look into the risk detections with one single button. You can see, hey, I can see this risk level is high of this user, but where does this come from? I also tried something with Windows Hello for Business, and the fun fact is this was not in the UI yet. So this was not findable in portal.azure.com, but the APIs were there. So that's another benefit. Microsoft will first release the API, and then they wrap it into the UI. So if you want to go ahead and try that out already, you don't need to wait for Microsoft to do it. You just build it yourself. Just create a Power App, create a custom connector that talks to Graph API, and you can do all the magic yourself. So that's a really fun experience. FIDO2 integration, also the temporary access pass. That's how I came with the idea. You can do it right here. And one great thing is the extension attributes. Those are only visible with Graph API. So a normal user or a normal IT person cannot see those attributes. If you rely on it, for example, if you need to know the cost center of that user, or the date of entry or that sort of attributes, you can look it up in this one single help desk tool. That's how I call the security information help desk tool. So that is another example. It's not published. Maybe I do a version 2 of this, but this was the first ever app that I built just to explore what we can do. And as you can see, all the apps have the same theme. They're all around identity and access management, because that's my main job. That's what I care about. But then again, I also can build great tools to help me and help businesses to adopt and to make it more efficient. The last thing that I want to mention is flexibility, because you cannot only talk to Graph API, which has a bunch of information if you rely on Azure AD and Microsoft 365, but you can also create custom connectors for external APIs. For example, to throw in some IDs, Spotify, for example, or Twitter. You can go nuts with that if you want. So you can talk from the Power Platform with APIs from different vendors, third-party applications, and integrate that, for example, with Teams. So you can create an Office playlist in Teams or SharePoint that then will be played in the Office, for example, to name an ID. So that is the flexibility of the Power Platform. It's not only Microsoft minded, but you can extend it to third-party applications as well.
One question is coming in, which is actually related more or less to third-party integration and support. Andrew is asking, can this Power App be tied into a typical service desk portal like ServiceNow, for example, for tracking tickets or other kind of integrations? But I believe as long as you have an API, possibilities are endless, or?
Yeah, I would say so. I would stress that I'm not a developer, so don't take my word for it. But I think as long as you have an API, you can integrate it. So one thing that I know from ServiceNow or Topdesk, for example, also have those integrations where you can kick off a trigger, an HTTP trigger or a webhook. As long as you can use webhooks, you can trigger processes outside of your software. So you can, for example, build in a process that triggers a webhook, and that kicks off an entire flow on the Power Platform. So I believe it's possible, but yeah, we need to look into that.
Hey, Jan, these are great examples, and yeah, definitely inspiring us to do going out our comfort zone. So the possibilities are endless, but how do you prevent proliferation, or in fact that an app becomes business critical? But no one is responsible for it. So someone built a great app, but then leaves the company. But a matter of fact, the payroll at the end of the month is relying on it, for example. So it became business critical. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, that's a typical question for IT folks, right? So how do we make sure that this is not going out of control?
Are you saying that I'm a typical IT guy, or?
I'm not saying we can fight after this, Ronny, but yeah, I hear this question all the time. And actually, when I was driving on here, I heard another podcast about the exact same question. And it's always a risk for IT who thinks that the things are growing out of hand quickly. And it's true. If you don't have governance in place, this will go out of hand very quickly. I fully agree. But at the other end, now that non-developers can build applications and processes themselves instead of relying on us IT guys, IT folks, I must say, then you could delegate all those permissions and responsibilities back to the organization, saying, hey, we're IT, but we facilitate this platform. We make sure that everything is we provide the guidance around it, but you are responsible for the applications that you build. And that's exactly a great thing. So business can create applications much more faster without IT being the bottleneck. And I have a slide for that as well. So let me skip through the licensing. We can do that later on. But I have a few things that you can say as your governance starting point. So some guidelines around governance. So how do you take control over your Power Platform? Let's say you onboard a new customer and they're already building on this platform and it's growing out of hand. You want to structure that. How do you do that? Where do you start? So the first thing is for delegation. You need to assign your administrators the Microsoft Power Platform Service admin or the Dynamic 365 Server admin role, because those roles can go to the Power Platform Admin Center, and those can make that governance. So that's the first important step. The next thing that you need to do is you have to restrict the creation of new production environments. So that will set boundaries on what you can do, because by default, if you have the license, you can go nuts with all the applications, all the connectors that you have. You can go do whatever you want. You need to restrict that. And again, it looks like the old IT story, but bear with me, I have the solution. So first we're gonna kick on the brakes to restrict the creation of any new environments. And that's what's important. The next step, the default environment that comes with the Power Platform, you can see that it's also called default. You need to rename that. And you need to rename that to so that it's clearly to the end user what the purpose is of that environment, which is personal productivity. So, for example, if you receive bunch of emails with attachments and you want to do something with that. You want to grab them out of the email and drop them into your OneDrive. You want to automate some of your recurring events, for example, or other productivity stuff. You should do that. You should be free to do that in the default production environment. So go nuts, but only use it for personal productivity, not for critical business applications, because that will grow out of hand really quickly. So no more new productions, because users can create them by themselves, and you have to treat the default environment as the environment that you use for productivity only, so only for your own benefit. But you also need to make sure that you have a process in place where users can request access for creation of new environments. If that depends on the IT doing stuff, like they do it, so there is a ticket or an email, and they say, yeah, I'm 2 days off. I'm going to take a look at it next week. And then next week you're busy with a Severity 1 ticket. And then within 2 weeks, the user has finally requested their new creation, then can building apps. That's not how it should be. You should create a process with automation, and you can use the Power Platform for that, where the user can request an environment, gives all the variables that they need. So where's it for? Who's the business owner? What I'm going to use it for? Is there any data loss prevention that I need to think of? And it should be done in hours, I should say. So there should be an approval process. You should have governance around it, but it shouldn't take weeks or days. So it should. I'm guessing that process. Exactly. That's why I said use the Power Platform for that. So you can build a Power App, for example, where you can request that environment, and then you can throw in an approval process where the admin or the IT manager or the person who's responsible for that can approve, and then you can automate that environment. So yeah, that's a great use case as well. The next thing is that you need to create separate environments and then for specific business group or applications. So don't create one environment and then throw in all the applications that you have and then mix and match with development and test and production. You should create environments, for example, per application, and then divide them in 3 environments. So you have a dev environment for application A, you have a test environment for application A, and you have a production for application A. And that's how you build your environments. And again, Power Apps is not my main focus, but these are all Microsoft best practices. So this is your starting point. And because of low platform solutions are relatively new, they're new to most organizations, you need to learn on the job. I don't have all the answers yet, but as you go, all these things are becoming more important and more clear on how do we make use of this platform and also have good governance. So there should also be a concept for proof of concepts and training workshops. You know, those concepts that you try a bunch of things and it doesn't work out, and over 3 years the environment is still there. You should have a process for that. So you can request an environment with, so to say, a retention policy. So hey, we have a workshop next week. We're gonna do our stuff. We're gonna have fun, but after a week it can be deleted. So that's also important. You need to have a process for those proof of concept and training things. Last thing is really important. You need to think about data loss prevention policies. And data loss prevention policies, we know that from Teams and SharePoint and data. You can also have DLP policies for your connectors. And there you can scope what connectors can I use and what connectors can't I use. And you can be really specific. You can say, hey, you can use the SQL connector, but you can only connect to these and these and these hosts, and no other hosts you can connect. So that prevents data leakage. And also, I want to take a step back to that default environment, but that we only use for user productivity, scope it down to the Microsoft 365 apps, so that you only can do things like, hey, when this event happens, I want to do that in Teams. For example, if this email comes in, I want to have a chat message in Teams. That's okay. That's fine for user productivity. But you have to scope down, block. That's not a nice word, but you have to scope it into business applications and non-business applications, and make sure that, for example, you never can use a SharePoint connector together with Twitter. because a handy user can then go on and say, hey, whenever this document is posted on SharePoint, I want to tweet that there is a new document with the name and the metadata of that file. You don't want that. So you don't want interference between some connectors. And that you can do with data leak prevention policies on top of the Power Platform. That's it. I have one slide for questions. So if you have for the licenses. So if you want to know more about licenses, go ahead.
Well, licenses is always an interesting topic, but I was more thinking indeed that it's almost too good to be true, indeed. But yeah, what about the cost? Are there costs involved, and that you can relate to licenses? I can imagine to a certain extent, especially with the vision of Microsoft supporting. Democratize your development, that might be for free, but if you're using it for critical business processes or with volume, there might be some costs involved. So yeah, I'm happy to hear more about that aspect.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think when you use the Power Platform for critical applications, you should also think about logic apps. And well, it can integrate with the Power Platform. So you have logic apps for the automation, and that is really consistent and secure. You can scope that down to only IT folks, for example. But then again, you have running costs. So if you kick off a flow that does certain things, you need to pay for that. But most of the actions are included in the default Power Apps and Power Automate license. For example, the one that you can find in Microsoft 365 E3, one of the most used licenses in business where I work with. But it is also in 365 for Business, for example. So most 365 licenses do have Power Apps licenses. And within that license, you can use all the default connectors, because there's a distinction between regular connectors, which are basically free, and the paid one. Those are the premium connectors. And most of the times where I stumble upon is that you create a perfect application, but you cannot get it working without a custom connector. And that's really smart, of course, but that will bump up the price. To make it really easy, you can pick between two things. You can say, hey, I want to pay per user. So every user who is using the Power App, I'm going to pay for that. Or you're going to say, no, I want to pay per app. So you can buy a license where you can build 5 applications, and that's all covered in that application, in that license. But it really depends on what you're going to build. And I have a link down there, and believe it or not, it is a page. It's a white paper with more than 30 pages on licensing from the Power Platform. And well, most of the times when I get questions around licenses, I run away and I say, hey, there are folks for that who are only doing that for their day job. So if you want to do a career change, I advise you become a Power Platform license guru, because we do really need those kind of folks. But yeah, it's really complex, but it is heavily depending on what you're going to do with it. But you can start today with your current license if you use the regular connectors.
And by starting today, starting and developing your own Power Apps, besides a license, besides a Microsoft 365 account, I suppose, what other things I do need to start for example, to automate my productivity things? Does it require more than that, or just that's it?
Well, good question. You as a user, as an end user, you can go into the Power Automate portal, and Microsoft will provide you templates. So, and those templates really help you with two things. One, I have never done this. I don't know where to start. How does this work? So you can use a template as an example and then tweak it a little bit to your needs. The second thing is it can bring you to ideas. So when you see, okay, here's a template that will trigger with a tweet, for example, and then it will grab that tweet and will put it into my Teams channel, For example, if something happens on Twitter that you want to know about, you can grab that hashtag, or you can alert on that hashtag and grab it into Teams. So it will give you great ideas on what you can do with the Power Platform. So I would say dive in, learn from the templates that are out there, and if your environment is well governed, so that you can only use your Microsoft 365 connectors, not much that can go wrong. So just dive in, just like I did a few years back, just trying what does this, what does that, and then go from there as an end user.
Well, I can definitely identify as a typical IT end user. I tried from an end user perspective. I used the Power Apps. It's quite easy. You can consume it from web. You can consume it from a modern app. And what you explained, that some guidance, common practices, setting up a default one, make a distinction between it's being used for your personal productivity and think wisely to automate your critical processes. And by giving these boundaries and guidance, that's definitely makes sense. So thank you for these kind of insights, Jan. It's definitely useful. So I know what to do the next weekend and try it out myself. Also giving the time, Jan. Many thanks for giving some insights on the use of Power Apps, how it can be used, and also some experience yourself, how to start, where to start, and think about the certain things to keep in mind. For the audience, many thanks for listening. And if you have any other questions afterwards, feel free to reach out. This recording was full of making our IT lives much more easier with the use of Power Apps. Special thanks to Jan, and thank you for joining. Our next live Ask Us Anything will be closed soon, as well as the matter. And if you have any suggestions or topics you would like to address, drop a line, please, via the socials or reaching out by email. And no worries, but in the meantime, on May 31, we are hosting our next webinar with Jesper Nielsen about endpoint manager and proactive remediations. And by the way, Jan, what are you doing on September 12th, between September 12th and 14th? Are you occupied, or are you free to do a session about Power Apps or identity access management, for example? Because are you free? Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Because mark your calendar, because from September 12th to 14th, the Workplace Ninja Summit 2022 is taking place, and in this year it will be an in-person event. It will be hosted in Switzerland. So I would definitely check out their website for the speakers to call for content if you want to speak. And that was it. So thank you all for joining, and looking forward to have you in the next episode of Live Ask Us Anything. So thank you again, and bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure. I hope you learned a thing or two, and until the next time. Bye.